Hello and welcome to Scale Stuff. In this week's video, I'm going to be building and reviewing the 1/76 scale Airfix Vintage Classic Matador truck and 5.5 inch gun. Not sure why, but I've been going on a bit of a truck run of late. I'm loving the look of these old army trucks, and it will be nice to add another one to the convoy in the cabinet. In the box you get the parts to build the model, black and white instructions, and a small sheet of decals to build one version of truck. The paint guide for this model is located on the back of the box. A first quick look at the sprues showed that it's, the classic vintage classic kit. Flash, seam lines and ejection pin marks are all over the parts, but that's pretty standard. The flash on this kit seems a little worse than normal, but it's the ejection pin marks that I'm going to have to keep an eye on, as on some old Airfix kits these can get in the way of the build, but we'll see I guess. This kit is a 2008 re-release of a tooling that dates back to 1966. Anyway, onto the build. First thing on the menu is the cab of the truck. All of the parts here need some cleanup, so before I start building I'm sorting out the flash. Some bits like this seat look really bad, but it looks worse than it is, and the mess sands off really easy. When it comes to the ejection ports on this model, I'm going to cut them off with a sharp knife. With the bits cleaned up, it's time to put them together. The fit on these bits is a little strange. They feel like they should be floaty, but go together quite well. A quick dry fit of the figure shows that he will be addable later on, so I can put off pre-painting for a bit. Make sure when you build the cab to add the second seat, as I missed out that bit, as the instructions show it added in the picture. Now it's time to add the main sides to the cab. These bits go on easy. They have ejection pin marks, but these won't get in the way of construction. When it came to adding the front of the cab though, there are two meaty injection marks here, and looking at where they end up when it's assembled, these could cause some fit issues later on, so make sure to watch out for them. With them off though, the fit's actually quite good, and only needs a light squeeze to get it to go together. I'm leaving the roof off of the cab at this point to make it possible to paint inside later on. Cab done, it's on to making the rear bed of the truck. This area goes together okay, but make sure to check the attachment grooves for cleaning up, as I missed a little bit of cleanup on the base part and it ended up making the fit needlessly fiddly. Next, it's on to adding the top canvas to the rear bed. This part of the build I thought would be simple, but the fit here is not the greatest, and there's a lot of backwards and forwards trying to get it all lined up properly. With those bits on, I'm going to leave it to dry for a good while so I can sand back a few of the joins to get a better finish. Now it's time to add some boxes and the fenders to the underside of the bed. These bits you would think would go on easy, but they won't quite fit straight off the sprue. I found out that the fit is improved if you sand them back a bit. So though annoying, it's not kit breaking. Adding the fenders though is simple and easy. Next it's on to making the chassis for the truck. This area goes together for the most part pretty simply, but I had a few issues in this step. Firstly, the drive shaft and the place that this attaches to on the chassis both have nasty ejection parts that will need to be removed in order to get these bits to fit. I also found out here that I was missing a few parts. Part 37, a leaf spring, and Part 31, a fuel tank spout. After checking back over the footage, both of these bits were not in the bag when the kit was opened, so that's not ideal. I could contact Airfix for some spares, as they've been good to me in the past with things like that, but being impatient, I've bodged together a leaf spring from a bit of sprue that was left over. I hope that this doesn't cause issues later on, but yeah, we'll see how we go. Now it's time to add the drive shaft and the diffs to the truck. These bits had the lion's share of the flash in this kit. Thankfully, it wasn't too hard to clean up. I think I got away with my bodge suspension arm, so yeah, that's a bonus. The drive shafts are a bit of a fiddle to add though. I found it's easier to add them to the diffs before adding them to the chassis. Next, it's just a case of adding the cab and the bed to the chassis. Thankfully, these bits go on quite well. With the main bits on the chassis, all that's left to do here is add the exhaust. This is also a bit fiddly to add, as the rear part doesn't have any proper locating pegs, but it goes on okay in the end. Finally, all that's left to do on the truck is add the wheels. These needed the holes rescoring and the seams sanding off. The wheels are a bit tricky to add as the pegs don't locate properly into the hubs. I found the fit was greatly improved by shortening the axle pegs, but looking at them on, the wheels seem to be a little bit too close together, even with them butted to the correct looking position on the hubs. At this point though, I've done my best and it is what it is, but with the wheels on in a roundabout kind of way, that completes the build stage of the truck. I'm going to leave this bit for a good while to dry so it's safer to handle later on. Next it's time to build the 5-inch gun. These parts needed a lot of cleanup before I could start to put them together. After a dry fit, I didn't like how the gun went together in the instructions, so I'm putting it together my way. I spent a lot of time while making this gun grappling with how to put it together, whether to have it towed or deployed. Eventually I decided to have it towed as it doesn't come with a crew. Knowing how you want to finish the gun will really aid in this step, as the gun's pretty fiddly to make if you try and make it movable, but it's a doddle to assemble if you just straight up glue it together the way you'd like it when it's done. With the gun done though, that's the build stage of this model complete. Now it's onto the painting. For the base coat on this model, I'm giving the truck and gun a quick spray with some Tamiya XS61 NATO Green. As always, I'm spraying this up off screen and outside to avoid fumigating myself. This is how the kit's looking with the base coat down. Firstly, I'm going to paint the black on the model. The main bit here is painting the wheels. This would have been easier if I'd have left them off, but it's not too bad to do with them on. While I have the black out, I'm also painting a few bits on the gun and the grille of the truck. Now it's time to paint all the fabric on the truck. For this I'm using Tamiya XF49 khaki. I'm giving the rear bed cover and seats a quick hit with this. This shade's not gone on well, probably because it's really humid and I shouldn't be painting really. But I'm going to press on and wait till this coat's properly dried before I go over it again. Next it's time to add windows to the truck. This kit doesn't come with any clear parts, so I'm making my own out of clear packaging. I'm gluing this in with neat PVA glue. Though it won't be a strong bond, it will be a clear bond. To aid in getting a clear and better bond, I coat the outside of the windows in PVA glue. This stops the drying PVA from leaving lines and seals the clear plastic up to the frames. This is what it's looking like with the front windshields in. I'm going to add the other panels off screen and leave this to dry overnight. With the windshields mostly dry, I move on to painting the solid windows in the back of the truck. After much internal back and forth, I've decided to paint these in Vallejo Grey RLM02, as having looked at a lot of reference pictures, the clear plastic on these parts always seems to have a bit of a grey reflection. With the base colours down, now it's time for the model's first wash. For this I'm using watered down black. This is a tricky model to get a wash onto, as the chassis is quite confined. The model really needed this wash though, as the wash is getting into all the recesses and making a lot of the details pop. Next it's time to add the decals to the model. For a small model, this kit comes with quite a lot of decals. I was very happy that the regiment plate came as a decal, as it saved me having to paint one on. As a lot of the decals are going over plank wood, they benefit from using a cotton wallbud to press them into the contours. Another nice thing about the decals in this kit is there's not a lot of carrier film on them, unlike some of the other kits in the Classics range. Now it's time for the truck's dust coat. For this I'm using my tried and tested dry brush of Army Painter Skeleton Bone. This truck really needed this dust coat, as I think I overdid it with the wash. I'm trying to go fairly light on the main truck part of the model, but on the canvas roof I'm doing this dry brush quite heavily, as old canvas really seems to gather dust and dirt. The dry brush will also highlight the brush marks a little bit. Normally you'd want to avoid doing this, but here it will give the canvas parts a nice textured look. Now it's time for the truck's second dry brush. For this I'm using Army Painter Elf Green. I'm only applying this to the truck part of the model, as I want the green paint to look weathered and worn. I'm also doing this on the 5.5 inch gun, as it needs a little bit more interest. With the main paints on, it's time to get some details. First I'm painting the front lights in demonic orange. Then I'm painting the rear, what I assume to be brake lights, in red. I get the feeling that this is not accurate, as you can't see any of these little lights on any reference pictures. Now I'm tidying up the windows with a wash of matte black, just to give them the passing illusion of having a bit more depth to them. While I've got the matte black wash out, I'm also going to highlight a few of the panel lines and get some shadows in between the planks. Finally, I'm giving the truck a light dab with some BS Dark Earth, just to make it look like it's seen some mud in its life. But with that on, I think I'm going to call this model done. This is the finished model. I'm quite happy with how this kit's come out. I think it really came together in the last stages of painting. In conclusion, the Airfix AEC Matador 5.5 inch gun is an okay model kit. I enjoyed making this model, but I found that a few of the build stages were a little tricky to put together. If you're willing to put in the work, this kit does make into a nice model. I would not recommend this kit for a complete beginner though, as I think fit issues are likely to frustrate a first time builder and put them off the hobby. If you're an old hand to the hobby, this kit shouldn't pose any difficult problems though. One thing in this kit I really liked was the decals. Seems for some reason Airfix pushed the boat out with this kit's decals, and it was nice to see things like the regiment plate added to the decal sheet for a change. I also like the gun in this kit, as though a little simplified, it's nice to have some artillery in the cabinet. Unfortunately, my kit was missing two small parts, but I wouldn't consider that a black mark on Airfix, as Airfix offered to replace them free of charge. But I was in a rush, so I made my own. Due to the nature of model kits, this does happen from time to time. As annoying as it is, I'm okay with that, as long as it doesn't start happening regularly. This kit cost me £7 brand new, and for what you get in the box, I think that this is a fair price to pay. Anyway, that's my build and review of the Airfix 1/76 scale Vintage Classics Matador and 5.5 inch gun. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and it helps you out if you're building or thinking of buying one of these kits at home. Until next time though, look after yourselves and have a good one. Goodbye.